I'll make sure you get your credit. I'm not going to go down there. But you can go on YouTube and you can look up the Kelly Clarkson show. The archaeologist that found the Goonies shipwreck, and it's a picture of Scott. But an archaeologist never found it. He reported it on somebody else's find. But he sits there on the show and, he tries to get out. A beachcomber found it, but he gets kind of cut off. But then later he drops my name, because he's a good guy. And,
I'm glad he's a good guy. It's just sad that they didn't call you too. I mean, they could have easily had both of you on there. Easily. Yeah,
I don't understand. I do understand, but it seems like it would benefit them so much more to do things the right way. It's kind of silly. It just doesn't. It's kind of frustrating. So, but it doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop me. I don't. I'm going to keep doing what I do.
Yeah, and we others, and then our listeners and stuff, we don't let it stop us because, there's so much out there, and if we don't discover it, who will? And, just keep on. I'm amazed with what you found already, and they wouldn't even have known about it if they didn't believe you in the beginning. And so
I feel like they almost tried to let it wash away so that there wouldn't be any credible, evidence even. And there was enough, local interest in other people that were just, not going to let it go. And so, but I'd already brought 20 plus pieces of the wreck out.
I was just going to say, didn't you bring a whole bunch back with you too?
Yeah. So, and then when that Geo got out here and stuff, they're like, what are you going to do with this stuff? And I was just like, well, I wanted it to get displayed in a museum. If I have to build my own museum or whatever, I want, a beeswax shipwreck museum because this is, that big of a deal. And so I took it all up and loaned it to the Columbia River Maritime Museum and the Nehalem Valley Historical Society. They've got a couple cannonballs in there and, some other pieces of wood that I found. And then they've also got other stuff other people have found in the Nehalem Valley Historical Society, as well as the Columbia River Maritime Museum. But,
wow.
So there's been little pieces of this wreck being found by people all over, but, nobody could figure out where it was at. And what was really confusing everybody was that it was north of where everybody's been looking, because traditionally on southern storms, the stuff would end up washing into Manzanita. And this is north of Manzanita, but there's a big gyre out there that we know about when we're fishing. There's a kind of a gyre there, a close gyre right off of the mountain, and it kind of holds, debris in it for days at a time sometimes. I've seen 19 plastic Japanese floats there for 2 weeks, going just hanging out. The wind won't blow it out of there because it's kind of a well, in the ocean.
Wow.
And kind of a low area.
Tell us what's down there.
The gyre. Wow. But the candles and all the stuff were always washing in after these southerlies, so everybody thought that wreck must be south. But what happens is it comes out of the cove up there and goes south to the gyre and hangs out there and then blows into the beach. So that's something that I just kind of put together, that kind of, that kind of was already leading me to that zone too. Just the knowledge of the way the waters were working. Cause I've been watching both the sand, the gravel and the rocks and the water out here, for 30 years.
So what is your favorite find from the wreck? Do you have a favorite piece of porcelain that you found, or what is your favorite thing so far?
Oh, man, there's so many of them. I think some of the pieces, a couple of the particular pieces of porcelain, I'd say my favorite kind of what I just kept, kind of wishing for as I was looking was an actual bottom of a piece of a bowl that had markings on it, where somebody from 300 years ago could speak to me, in a sense. Like there's 4 glyphs on the bottom of four characters on the bottom of the little piece of a pottery I have on my Facebook page there is my profile picture. I'd say that was probably my first real favorite porcelain that I found. There's tons of others. I found a couple of lid pieces that have the, little knob on the top. I always wanted to find a little Fu Manchu dog lid, but I never have. As far as like the wood I found, you'd think the big beam I found first was the coolest one that I liked the best, but it was the second one. It was the deck support that I found, I think, was my favorite. Out of the pieces of wood that's in the Nehalem Valley Historical Society. And then, the cannonballs I didn't find. I found one of those somebody else had that I bought it from them because they were just using it as a doorstop. And it came from a kind of significant site of, where Gray, bombed the natives after, one of the natives had taken a sword that one of the crew members had left on the beach, and when the Spanish guy had come back to take a sword from the natives, they killed him. And then Gray, reprimanded them by blasting them with cannonballs into their villages. And there's two village sites on Tillamook Bay that were, where they were attacked, and you can tell by the name because the natives call them the places of death. Anything that starts with an MEMA in their words is a place that was a place of death, and these two different locations, are what they called that. And I assume that was because of the history, probably because Gray had, destroyed their villages there. And there's some, there's evidence for that too.
We did get a question in chat for you. I'm wondering if you might have a moment. So ORH, Ohio Relic Hunter, Bill, would like to know if you've heard of Battle Rock in Port Orford, Oregon. And if you have heard of it, if you plan on detecting near it, and if not, you need to definitely get down there.
I've heard of it. I'm trying to think of what that story is about. There's a lot of these different treasure stories on our coast, and I know I've heard something about that one, but it's not on the top of my head right now. What it was about.
Well, you've heard of it, so that's good. We've got that covered.
Yeah, and Port Orford's about 4 hours from me, so the chances I get down there to do a lot of metal detecting not that great. But I will keep that in mind and go check it out if I am down there. So
fantastic.
I really like I love it when people have new insights and information. That's what helps lead to these things. Is just like the guy was telling me, the rock slide wasn't as old as I thought it was. The huge change in my perception of what I was looking for. I realized if that rock slide, and I was documenting how the surf was affecting it over the years. I was taking, photos every year of it so I could compare them. Like that rock moved that much. And these are big rocks. I mean, like big rocks. And, and so I was like, and I'd seen that slide change over my lifetime. And then when he'd given me that information, it was just a huge aha moment that like the slide I'm looking for, if the mountain caved in on it, like the natives said, is more or less gone. And that's kind of what the site is, it's a, bedrock, wave sloped shelf that comes off the, up into the sea caves. And the ceiling of the original sea caves, as they extended out further, were, I guess, let me restart there. Imagine a ship getting pounded into the cliffs from ocean storms and breaking up. And then you have this giant earthquake. And into those cliffs are these caves, and all these parts of the ship are pushed in there. And, maybe half of it here or a quarter of it there or just a deck here, And then you have the 1700 megathrust earthquake, and that falls all that on there, trapping it. The only reason I found, any of this was because of the 1700 earthquake, trapping the wood there and never letting it move. And then over the years, when the southerlies come in there, it's a very southern-facing cove. That's when it would dislodge the candles. You imagine rocks rocking around in there, and there's lighter material under them. What's it going to do? It's going to pump it up out of it. And so a lot of the beeswax has like like frosting shape, like it was squeezed out of something. And then so with all these weird angles and shapes on the beeswax never made any sense to me until I found the site. And then it was like another one of those aha moments. I'd come up with the idea that the porcelain was moving around that way when rocks would fall off the cliffs and displace where it was at in the sand and the gravels, because I saw this big slide happen in 2010. And right after that is when I started to see larger pieces of porcelain come up. And this isn't in the same site. This is another site. But if I'm finding porcelain, throughout this whole huge area, and the rocks fall onto some of that, sand and material, it's gonna kind of puke it up around the rocks and then get washed in. And so I was working on that premise for about 10 years of my hunt, and that was kind of when I saw realized that the wax is these shapes too. After I found the wreck, that's why, because it's getting kind of pumped up between these rocks and the material. And so I believe there's still cargo left, in the ship, buried under the rocks, that the crew never really got, fully salvaged out of it. But there's some evidence that most of the cargo was removed from the shipwreck at this point, is what I'm seeing. Because I'd done mercury tests. I'd sent in some test lab to have mercury tested on the wood, and it came back at background, because that ship was carrying 5 tons. And so they had a chance to remove it. A guy later on found that mercury, so in the area. So that correlates it being that wreck almost 100% in my mind. In my mind, because there's not native mercury here, and when they drop timber and mercury squirts out of a vault in the ground, it's not natural. So that. And like I said, the Lost Dutchman never told anybody where he was at. So the same thing. All these other treasure hunters that are in the news here, and we're in the news and all that, or we're trying to get funding and stuff, we're out in the open. They're not the people to be concentrating on, because they weren't finding anything, and that's why they were out advocating, to get popularity just through the advocation of what they were doing. So,
well. If people want to watch the Nat Geo episode that you were on, where can they go to, and what's the name of that episode?
It's on a bunch of different, of the medium, different, places to watch it on. You're gonna have to probably pay something, but National Geographic. It was a Drain the Oceans. It was an episode. It was gosh, I should look it up here real quick. I had it in my head. It was like season 9, episode 7 is what's in my head. But it's called Drain the Oceans, Myth of the Pacific Pirate Ship.
Ooh.
And it's not a pirate ship. It was a Spanish galleon. But that's sounded better, I guess, to the
producers.
But it's also been thought of as a pirate ship all these years, and maybe they know something I don't, because, there's been this conjecture. Is it the galleon? We never found a bell. We haven't found the cannon. We've just found all the cargo off of it. So did a pirate ship, is a pirate ship what put an end to it? Because it was, the natives say there were 2 ships chasing it, and it was under distress with, being fired on by cannons. They didn't know that. They just said it was, I would have to read their description, because, they didn't know what they were looking at the time. Some of the descriptions said that they were big giant whales that came ashore, and they had trees growing out of their backs. And then another description was, that it was a giant, like a trumpeter swan, and that they were trumpeting back and forth at each other with billows of smoke. So there's a number of different, kind of both, I think, passed down verbally stories that the locals have all heard over the years. And then there's some that are actually wrote down as accounts from, early homesteaders. So,
wow.
Let me try to pull that page up.
I did share a link to the beeswax ship timbers from Nat Geo, so it's there in chat if others would like. I think the link doesn't work per se anymore in our new chat, so you can just copy paste it into a web browser and it should work.
I did a podcast a while back explaining some of it on